Okay.
Okay, and welcome to a special edition of Book and a Beverage. We have Tanner, who is the unfortunate victim, and he will be asking questions to all of us here. Katherine D. Graham, I'll let you explain pitch coaching because I'll get it horribly wrong, but she's a pitch coach. You're a beta reader, a developmental editor, a proofreader, and an author of 5 books. Yes?
Of a lot. I quit counting after so many. I don't know. I think I'm up to like 10 or right at 10, but
wow.
It's been a lot over the course of 3 years since.
What don't you do?
I don't do line editing. I don't do copy editing, and I am not a marketing expert.
And then,
it's so nice to meet you, Tanner.
Funny to go with.
Too, Catherine.
And we have Ro here, who is actually a line editor, and he's the author of 8, soon to be 9 books, correct?
Yeah, 9 will come out probably hopefully next week, and a couple of novellas.
And then I'm the publisher. I have published 4 books, and I can tell you all the things that you should not do. And that's my qualifications. So Tanner, what questions do you have for us?
Oh wait, we want to know about you, Tanner.
Oh
No,
yeah.
about me.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of a hobby artist. I'm kind of, again, level 1 stage. Still trying to figure myself out, figure out my niches, and as far as just like how I want to format my writing and how I just want to just get to it and stuff. So that's me.
So in nerd parlance, you are still rolling your character.
Yeah, I'm still rolling my character.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I guess to segue into my questions, I guess I can tell you all where I'm at, which is I kind of have a newfound fascination with war stories, both fiction and nonfiction. So maybe we can make that like the subject or the theme for the first 30 or so minutes of like, how do we make a story in this grand conflict? Because I know in a lot of fantasy stories there's this big raging wars between clans and stuff, and like, how do you keep track of it all? Because like, yeah.
Don't
you
the war is background noise, figuratively and literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You want to do the same thing you do with everything else. Focus on the characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in that? You ever see Band of Brothers?
No, I have not. Sorry.
Oh my God. Okay. Here's 10 hours of your life that you won't regret giving up.
Yeah.
Watch Band of Brothers.
Okay.
It follows one unit.
Mm-hmm.
You will get to know about 6 guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole war centers on those 6 guys. All the rest of the war is going on, and you know what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not where the story is. The story is what's going on in that foxhole.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you want to. Don't get bogged down in, sweeping army movements and flanking and all that nonsense.
Yeah, like politics. I know, like with a lot of stories, politics can be a hit or miss thing. Like sometimes it can be really interesting. Sometimes it can just be like, okay, why is this happening? Why do I care about, the intergalactic federation, whatever? So, so if you were to do that, like if you were to say, do it from perspective of like a leader, how would you make that interesting? Like, would you have them tackle, I guess, more of the moral conundrums that they're facing and stuff?
Depends on your story, right?
Yeah.
I'll let Katherine go on this for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually thinking, I hope Ro carries this because everybody knows I'm a pantser, like through and through pantser. But I do reverse developmentally edit my book, and so in doing so, I think I've picked up on some trends of things that I don't want to do again.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that the POV, I don't know. I personally don't recommend planning from a POV, a certain POV, because the story is going to often pick a character that it's just sort of going to belong to. And I feel like if you try, like you can write, say, this is my POV character, this is their story, this is their book, then obviously you can write about that person, about that character. But if you don't even know who you want to write that scene from yet, start the book out, start getting up to that point, have an idea of this penciled in that you want to get there as one of your story beats or the plot points, and then see whose POV were you last in. Does it make sense to stay in their point of view? Should you shift to somebody else's point of view for the sake of the story? Because you don't want to put a person there just to give the reader a better story. Like, it sounds sort of backwards. You don't want to put somebody there as the POV character just because they would be more dramatic as much as, like, for a plot sake, I guess what I'm getting at. It comes down to the character growth. Who's going to grow as a result of that scene the most? And plot you can catch up on in anybody else's perspective. But again, Ro, I think you're more of a planner than I am. So
I have never been called that. You take that back.
Okay, I'll take you back. Welcome back to the Pantsers.
I will just add that to me, I, like Rose said, don't talk about flanking movements and the whole, tell this one person this is what they're seeing. They're scared to death. What do they always say? War is 24 days of boredom and 5 minutes of sheer terror or something like that.
Yeah.
So, that's what you want to talk about is that, show the boredom. We're doing this. We're doing this. We're bored. We're cold, and then all of a sudden everything starts flying and you're diving for foxholes. And that's what you want to capture. You don't want to capture. And then I watched the 16 tanks break through the woods and, unless they're like right there trying to dodge being run over, then fine. But, it's always personal. But just like they say, all politics is local. All your story has to be told from a person and what they're seeing, what they're feeling. That's what's of value.
So if you've never seen Band of Brothers, right now on Apple TV, there is the Air Corps version of that kind of show called Masters of the Air, which is really, really good. This is a book by Frank Murphy, who was in the 100th Bomb Group, and a lot of Masters of the Air was taken from this book. It's not a dry read, right? But it's not, it's a there I was kind of thing. But it kind of points out that he doesn't really talk about all the stuff going on everywhere else. He's in a B-17, and that's where it's taking you, is from that very narrow kind of point of the war. What's EL saying here? You talk about a flanking movement if the flanking movement is the sudden inspiration of the character. Yeah, another thing, if you really got some time to go down a rabbit trail, I would suggest going to the Congressional Medal of Honor Society webpage, Congressional Medal of Honor Society.org, I think it is. And I know it's not called the Congressional Medal of Honor, it's just the Medal of Honor, but that's the name of the society anyway. And they have every person who has ever received a Medal of Honor, they have the write-up that was submitted with that person, right? Now, a lot of the ones from like the Civil War are, took General so-and-so flag from his camp. That's it. That's the whole thing. But you start getting into Korea, Vietnam, World War II, and they're really long things. And it will give you some really good ideas of what kind of, in your action sequences, what type of things you can do that might sound ridiculous, but have actually happened, right?
Yeah.
And you start reading that thing, and it's just like a whole lot of Jesus Christ, what the, there's a lot of that when you read through there. But take a look at that.
Gotcha. So what's
interested
something I was interested in what Katherine said is like, she said like with POV characters, like something along the lines of like how I kind of write is like, I think of a really cool character concept and I'm like, okay, I want to make I want a story about this character. But it doesn't seem like Katherine really does that. Like they're more of just like, Katherine, can you explain your process? Like how you would like decide, okay, this would be a good story concept?
Well, for an overall book, I would definitely start with a character, and that's usually the character I write about, just like you. I just meant if you had multiple characters, because I think I misunderstood you. If you have multiple characters and you're like, whose POV should I pick for this one scene? That's when I would be like, well, who's going to grow the most because of this one scene before you pick whose head you're in. Because I know some authors, including myself, when you dive into fantasies and epics, you get into multiple POV. You can have up to 4 or 5 or 6 people. And it's like, who am I going to write this scene through? Well, who needs to be the person that you're seeing experience the scene was more of what I was getting at.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I understand. Okay. So, to continue on like what gosh, I'm losing my mind. Sorry, I just got back from work. On the topic of the Medal of Honor, there's definitely a lot of inspiration from history in a lot of writing. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is how do you pick? I mean, history, I mean, us humans have been on this planet for a really long time. Like, how do you pick? Like, oh, would this be interesting or would that be interesting? Like,
something is going to interest somebody, right?
yeah.
I mean, what interests you as a writer? Because if you're not interested in it as a writer, it's going to show in your writing. It's going to be, to go to Catherine's thing about character. I just put in the chat the Proust character development questionnaire. So when you're, Catherine's nodding. Good. I'm glad it's not just me. When you're trying to figure out your character, just, kind of scribble down some notes about it and then go through, and there's just like a ton of questions, and answer all these questions about your character, right? And some of them are going to seem really silly, like what's their favorite song and blah, blah, blah. But knowing all that information about them will help inform why they make the decisions they make, right? If they are from a broken home or with an abusive parent or something like that, their reaction to a situation might be different than from someone who's not in that situation, right? He might go help that mother who's being abused much more quickly if he's from that relationship and has seen that before. You know what I mean? So even though a lot of those things may seem kind of, this is kind of too in the weeds, we don't need this, especially coming for the first time, it's a really good exercise just to kind of get an idea of who this character is. Because we've talked about it a lot here. Your character will do something stupid that you're not expecting in the course of you writing your book.
So, Tanner, just as a counterpoint, I hate that questionnaire, and I will never, ever do it. But, I mean, when I write, my first draft is, I'm kind of feeling out the characters, and I might decide, in chapter 17, no, I want to go this way with the character, so I put a Post-it note, change chapter 5. They're not going to be nice to this person. They're going to be mean because this is, and I kind of get a feel for the characters in the first write-up, the first pass through. And then I go through and I'm like, okay, what makes sense? What are, which one is speaking to me? Are they the really nice grandmotherly one? Or are they the charlatan that just dresses like an old lady to scam people, and after I'm done, I'm like, okay, which way are we going? And then the second time through, I will commit to, yes, they are this way or that way. But I've seen that questionnaire, and there is no way that if I live 6 lives that I would ever do that. It's not for me. But it doesn't mean it can't work for you, because I always tell people, you put 10 writers in a room, you'll have 14 different ways of writing a book. So, yeah, but it's something to look at. If it works for you, do it by all means.
Even if you don't do it, at least look through it, because you can get a lot of the idea of what they're trying to teach you by reading through what it is that they want you to do and why they want you to do it. At least it gets you thinking in different ways, and that's really the point.
Yeah, that made me thinking. Usually when I create a character, I think, okay, what personality traits will I have for them? Would I have this personality? But I just kind of found something that I think would be pretty interesting. Going off of the whole broken home thing, this idea that this like taking the backstory, and then basically the idea I'm coming on with this is instead of just starting, okay, they have this personality trait, I start with the backstory, and that kind of fuels everything
Yeah.
else that the character becomes,
Yeah.
because that's going to affect their personality trait, that's going to affect their character decisions. That's basically their whole foundation, which is something I never really thought of before. So I really appreciate that.
So
Yeah, and to Mike's point, it's like it doesn't matter which order you do it. If you do the personality, you decide up front, or you write them and then you go back and fix what doesn't match, as long as it's consistent.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I just want to add that I actually, when I went for my eclipse vacation that Ro laughs at me all the time for, I went to the John James Audubon Museum in Henderson, Kentucky, that I didn't know existed, and I didn't even know what his first name was. And I was reading like Wikipedia page, and the guy was kind of a charlatan. And you don't hear that from the Audubon Society. And I have a series coming up where I need like a con man, and I'm like, you know what, John James Audubon, you're going to be my con man. I just have to give you an ancient Portuguese type of name. But, and I mean, I saw that, and I'm like, he's big, broad-shouldered, hulk of a man, and apparently he's a wimp. And I'm like, you know what, this is great. I'm going to, personify him in a fantasy setting, and no one's going to know except for anyone watching this show that that's the case. But yeah, I mean, you can look at people in history and take, what did they do? Why did they do that? Then, maybe that's the type of personality you want, or you can take pieces of personalities from people One of these days, Neil, your stepdad, is going to make his way into one of my books, because he is just a very interesting person.
Yeah.
And people are going to go, I can't believe that character. And I'm going to go, well, he's real.
Yeah.
Truth is stranger than fiction. And we just need to take a real quick break from this bout of seriousness that we've been having.
Yes.
I understand, Mike, that there was something on Mexican television regarding the eclipse that you want to share with everyone. I think that would be a really good way to loosen things up for a minute.
Oh, God, Ro. Okay, Catherine, don't judge me. So apparently, Mexican local TV station, they were saying, send in your pictures of the eclipse, and they're putting it on air, and there was no real quality check before they put them on. And the other thing is, you should know, is apparently in Latin America, it's a thing where people eclipse the sun with their testicles. And someone sent this picture into the local news station, and they put it on the air without checking. And then they said the woman there was gasping, couldn't, oh my, froze. And the guy just no, I'm just going to keep reading and act like this didn't happen.
I told Mike we wouldn't call it teabagging the sun, and we won't. So, all right. So let's.
So anyway,
we'll just break there. Okay.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Okay, we just wanted to break that up. We'll give you a little bit of time.
Making me think of that Arrested Development episode.
Give you some time to think of your next question.
Okay. Well,
entirely coincidental.
Well, my friends aren't here right now, but I can kind of use them as inspiration for questions. My one friend Ella is a really big horror enthusiast, and a lot of main characters of horror stories are usually not very good people, so I like to ask, how do you write a character that is just an awful human being, but you still want to root for them in a weird way? How would you pull that off?
So I actually wrote a character who was a villain protagonist, which I didn't know was a thing until after I published my book and someone told me that was a thing. And this guy was just unlikable. He was always oh, my life is so hard. And then he'd kill somebody and, steal their, and then he'd get caught and he'd lose it. And he'd be like, my life is so hard. And he's just a thoroughly unlikable person. And at the end, he gets what's due him. But that is the one book that people, that's my least popular book of everything I've published, because he was just unlikable. I mean, it's if you're doing an anti-hero, somebody who's trying to do the right thing, but doesn't. Like they want to do the right thing, but their methods are questionable, or they're impulsive and they do the wrong thing, and oops, that person ended up dying because I couldn't control my anger. You can do that. It's just, why are they doing things wrong? Are they impulsive? Do they just have to be loved and they're not, so they strike back? Find out what is the personality trait that's driving it is what I would do. And then just lean into that.
A lot of popular comic book heroes in the last 30 years are objectively not nice people. Deadpool, objectively not a nice dude, right? Punisher, Spawn,
Tony
all
Stark.
of these people have some serious, killing character flaws. But so why do people like them? Well, because they have a sense of, it's like a lot of old-time criminals, right? They're horrible people, but they have a code of ethics. And it might be a very skewed code of ethics, to most people. But they do have a code of ethics and they follow it, right? And people can kind of get behind that. So you have to give the character something that people can hold on to, right? Like he won't kill kittens, whatever it is. Let's give them that lifeline so they can still like the guy, even if he's otherwise fairly morally reprehensible.
Gotcha. Something that kind of, I'm thinking about is this idea of like the character having some sort of philosophy. Like, I act this way and do these things because of this belief, and this belief will make me do some things, but it also won't let me do other things. As opposed to, I'm Mr. Evil and I can do whatever I want, because if they can do whatever they want, then that's not as interesting, I imagine.
And Thanos, I think, again, I hate to keep going to the MCU, but Thanos was right?
Yeah.
The world has finite resources. The universe has finite resources. We're killing each other over them. We could have a peaceful utopia, but it's going to mean half the people have to go.
Yeah.
Right? And that's all. But nobody's going to make that decision because that's immoral.
Yeah.
Like the best likable villains are not evil for evil's sake.
Right.
It's the relatability. To make us like them, we have to actually care about them. And the more we care about them, the more we like them, the more we wish they had a redemption arc, the more tragic it is when they don't get a redemption arc, and the more the readers cry at the end when the character is unalived.
When I was writing my first books, the bad guy in it was a guy named Winter, right? And of course he had I have this power now, I found magic, nobody else can use it except for one other person. I'm going to take over this little corner of the world and install my own kind of philosophy on it. And I purposely, as I was making him and going through the steps, was adding in things where people would hopefully see it as, the way he's going about this and the way he's doing it, he's doing a lot of really good things for people, right? I mean, people are being fed and they're being housed, blah, blah, blah. But every now and then he would have a moment where he would just kill a fool because they were getting in the way of his plan, right? Now, he eventually did have his redemption arc at the end, and et cetera, et cetera. But, it sometimes takes a little bit of planning, and sometimes it just works out. But
the villains usually end up being my favorite characters in what I write. Like, favorite is in most fun, because I can't pick one favorite, right? But, I think that's because I put way more thought into what makes them human and keeping that before what makes them evil than I do the main character, because by default, readers give the first named protagonist on the page a automatic, I want to connect with you. They don't give the villain that. So it's like you have to really dig for that.
Yeah, it's important that you understand the villain. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? And again, if you just say they're pure evil, and that's boring. So give them a reason, like Rose said, they think they're doing the right thing. No one else in the right mind would agree with that, but they think so. That's fine. But the reader has to understand your villain, or else it's just a plot device.
Yeah.
Voldemort is one of the most boring villains ever.
Yes.
I mean, why did he do what he did? Because he could. There's really nothing bigger in it than that. Because he could. And because of that, nobody cares about him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think villains are interesting in like, I mean, all stories need conflict, and which character has the most inner conflict or the conflict around them than the villain.
Yeah.
So it just oozes interest, I imagine.
Well, I mean, the hero can have conflict around them as well.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and usually though, what they do is the conflict is, well, especially with a lot of young adult stuff, the conflict is, oh, I don't want to do this. This is going to be hard. I can't learn whatever it is. And really all it makes me want to do is kick him in the shins. It's super annoying. But you can have that conflict within the hero, right? I mean, do they have to go away from their family maybe, right? Maybe they have to leave their kids for a while and go off and do this thing. Or there can be that. And it would, thinking about it, yeah, that would be a good thing to do, is have them have, you can have more than one conflict going on at the same time.
Okay, I just thought of another question. Another horror-related question. I know with suspense, it's all a matter of like perspective. I know I've heard of the bomb theory, where it's like if two people are talking about baseball and a bomb goes off, then you're like, oh, whoa, a bomb went off. But if you show there's a bomb underneath like the stands, then you're thinking, oh my gosh, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb, which creates that sense of intensity. So what I'm wondering is, if you were to write a horror story, what are some tricks you could use to, create suspense, I imagine?
Stay away from baseball, first of all.
Yeah.
Yes, baseball. There's no suspense. It's just boring.
Yeah.
The time element is always good, right?
Yeah. And if you give the reader information that the main character doesn't know, then just like your bomb theory there, they don't know there's a bomb there, so they keep talking about baseball because they have nothing else to do with their lives. But so give the reader information your main character doesn't have, and they'll be screaming, but you can't trust Katherine. No, just kidding, Katherine. Exactly. You can always trust Katherine.
No, I can't. If you're reading my books, though, I make no promises. Sort of like Mike ripped my heart out. I'm still sore about it. But no, and I think that actually that's what I thought of the second I thought of this, and not necessarily for horror, but building suspense in general often is spurned from something within the character, and it doesn't have to be the ticking clock necessarily. I know a lot of people put the ticking clock sort of concept in there, that they're counting down to something. The eclipse is in X number of days. And we've got this amount of time to get this done, or we have to get the ring to Mordor before Sauron takes over the world. It's like, it can be broad, it can be specific. But with horror specifically, I can speak English. I think you have the added bonus of the fact that readers are looking for the things that are going to add suspense as well, right? So if I'm reading a slasher, then I'm looking for the signs, the hints to start picking up on early on in the book, that, oh, wow, this person looked at them funny from across the mall and they'd never seen them before. And then, oh, they saw somebody with a newspaper and they looked like they might have the same outfit. And it's like, you have the ability to bring world building in, to bring stuff that isn't just plot in, and marry it all together to add to your suspense, in addition to whatever main, I'm going to call it your tactic, your method of approach to writing it.
And I would say for me, I do this with every single book, is when I write the story, I'm like, okay, this is kind of dull, but you know what? If I change chapter 3, like the person is looking at them funny and then they don't see him again until chapter 9 and they look at him funny again. And you're like, that's weird. Why is he doing that? But then I'm like, put do a chapter on him and says, he's obsessed with blonde girls and the main character is a blonde, just, I would go, after you have your story, it's easy to go back and, add the tension by like, if I tell the reader this, then they'll, be able to put 2 and 2 together and my main character won't. And, you can always, I'm always doing that, going, how can I make this, more dramatic? What can I add in chapter 3 that will pay off in chapter 27, which I don't know in chapter 3. But after I've written the first draft, then I'm like, okay, how can I, massage this and make it be able to ramp up the tension? So that's what I do most.
If I can throw out a couple more things, your bad guy has to have the ability to do what they're threatening to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if early on in the book you can show he has the will to do it, and he's not going to like back out at the last minute, and the other thing is, I mean, you go into these books or movies or whatever it is, and you always know, right, that the heroes are going to make it out or whatever it is. But there's always that part where you're sitting there going, how the hell are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Right. And if you can get that piece right, where you can set up the gates that they have to go through, where your reader is going to be asking themselves, how are they ever going to get out of this? That will keep the pages turning so they can find out.
Okay.
And I will just add my first book, when I sent it to a developmental editor, she did a lot. And then she goes, well, your ending's a little boring, maybe add something there, but it's, overall the book is good. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot have a boring ending. I mean, I just can't. And I remember calling my brother, I'm like, okay, this is the scenario. The guy's sitting up on top of a rocky outcrop. He has no weapons. The guy below him can control his mind if he tries to do anything, and he has to win. How? And I'm like, oh my God. And and then finally it clicked. I was like, I don't know. I'll just try this. And I just start writing. I was like, wait a second. I said this back in chapter 8. I can use it. And so I'm really happy with my ending of the final conflict. But that was, oh my God, I was sweating bullets. Like I was like, how do I do this? And I just, for a couple of days, I just kept turning it over and had nothing. And then finally I just started writing. I was like, wow, I don't know. Let's write this. It can't be worse than what I have. And then it just clicked. Oh my goodness. So yeah, sometimes you just got to turn it over, think about it, go for a walk. I don't know. I kept asking my brothers, but they're never any help. I don't know why I keep doing that. But
this is going to sound goofy, but I think Mike's just hit on a golden ticket there. Go for a walk.
Yeah.
Don't bring headphones with you. Just go for a walk and listen to the world and think of, just let it kind of percolate in your head. And you will be amazed at how many really good ideas you come up with on a walk. Yeah. Have your phone with you with a little voice recorder app to it or something, where when that one hits, you can just talk it out and then go back and add it on later. But walking is fantastic for writing.
Yeah,
look,
you agrees.
Just or sleeping as long as you. Or sleeping as long as you quit it when you actually get the idea.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm gonna keep swimming this kind of horror web because I want to give some content for Ella if she ever watches this live stream. Something we always talk about is as I guess writers is whenever you see a story that you don't like, you think, okay, how did this get made? How could have we done it better? And with horror movies, there's no end of those. There's like no end of bad horror movies. So we always think like, okay, a lot of horror movies are just like, I don't know. It's like hard to create a story because a lot of horror movies have all the characters being brutally murdered by the end. So if that's the case and it's all just doom and gloom, it just kind of makes it feel like nothing has a point. So I guess, how do we find this balancing point of like, okay, it's a really, really dark story, but there's still this glimmer of hope that keeps the reader interested and makes them think, okay, this was kind of worth it in the end. So,
I love this.
That's
I answered this for Rachel Renner when she came on during the Blitz over New Year's, and asked basically, how can you people, we people being the grimdark people, you know, and you know there's going to be a happy ending. And I think that comes back to we sometimes as readers, we don't read because we're looking for the happy ending. If you're reading dark, you probably know there won't be. You're reading because the journey is more important than the end. And reading because you want to know that there is somebody out there who has it worse than you because it makes your situation look better, or you're reading because you'd like to see that it could, there's still hope even in that situation, how they would cope with that, where their humanity is in that. So personally, I think there's the two different kinds of readers, and someone picking up books like that would know, just like someone who picks up romances that know they're always going to have a happily ever after. It's not an option. It's always going to be a happy ending. The couple's always going to get together. It's always going to be yay. They're reading it for the journey. And so give us a good journey.
And I would also say for your protagonist, you know, I have a plan to get out of here. You know, this is all I have to do. And then almost immediately the plan goes wrong and like, okay, but I can fix it if as long as I do this. And, you know, as long as they have hope and they believe that I can make it, then your reader's going to be going, oh yeah, he just needs one lucky break. And of course you never give it to him because you're a cruel person. And that's why you torment fictional characters, because to do it to real people is illegal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember one thing I said during one of my conversations with Ella was, you can have a grim dark setting without having grim dark characters. Because if your character is just like Mr. Grumbles and is, you know, angry all the time, then that can create issues.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again going to depend on the author's specific approach, because sometimes we pick up these things just because we love the character development is so deep and so real. I think that's the only reason, what was it, House of Dragons, the prequel to Game of Thrones? We know what happens to that family. This is not a question of are they going to come out on top. Why do we watch the prequel? We watch the prequel because of the characters that were developed that we loved. And we're like, I want to see more, even though I know how it's going to end. You know, or Rogue One in Star Wars or anything else where it's like, you know, going in, there's no hope for these people, but you care so much about the characters that you just don't care.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I like it.
So Tanner, are you reading anything currently?
Am I reading anything currently? I am consuming some stories. I have been watching The Bear with Neil a bit, if anyone knows that show, and that I feel like is a good story of like conflict fueling the narrative because everyone is at each other's throats in that story. But
is that the one
also,
with the chef in the sandwich shop?
Yeah, the chef in the sandwich shop. Yeah.
Okay.
The whole point is to show the dysfunctionality of not only this kitchen but this almost family, because there's this one, basically this one dude's brother died and he got the sandwich.
Oh,
there you are.
He said the unalived word without changing it.
Yeah, sorry, I got a call for a second. Yeah, so there's a lot of drama between the characters because some characters are jealous of each other, but and through it all, there are some shining moments of like, even though you just saw these characters yelling and screaming and swearing at each other, they still have this like that tiny little spark of goodness in them, which I think is pretty interesting. But yeah, that kind of got my mind churning on like ideas of like, okay, if we put a bunch of characters in a very, you know, dysfunctional situation, I mean, that's like what a lot of stories are. It's like, okay, take a bunch of characters, put them in a really dysfunctional situation, and just let them work it out. Yeah, I've been kind of clinging to stories like that, where it's just like a really wide among of casts. I mean, MCU, again, we keep coming to the MCU. Guardians of the Galaxy was one of the their biggest hits because it was just that, you know. So I guess to create a question out of it, how do you create a story with a large cast like that, and how do you give them all equal amount of attention and care, I guess?
Well, you look at Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, there was really about what, 6 people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it really kind of focused on.
Yeah.
In a book, you have the ability, thankfully enough, to you can introduce each one in their own chapter.
Mm-hmm.
You can give them some backstory. You can give them how they met, and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And there's you have to. That's up to you to figure out how you're going to keep them all busy.
Gotcha.
And whenever I have to, whenever I think about stuff like that, I go right back to Tolkien. It's like, okay, what do they do? Right? It's like, Bilbo and Frodo are hanging out, having a party. Bilbo goes off on his own. Gandalf talks to Frodo for a bit. Then Frodo goes off with his 2 stupid cousins, and they go to Bree. Right? There they meet Strider. They go off. They have an adventure. Then they go off, and it's just ABC, right? It's just point to point to point to point, and the things happen. And the amount of people kind of build little by little, whatever it is.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like
right, Ro? They divide and conquer, or Tolkien does. There comes a point where it's like the fellowship's too big. So Boromir is unalived, and then you have let's split off Legolas, Gimli, and Strider in their 1 chapters that are all 3. It's not like we got flipping POVs for every single person in that party. It was let's lump these 3 together because they're on a compatible arc, and let's lump this person together and Frodo and Sam together, and then you're just alternating groups too.
Yeah, and then let's forget about the Eagles until the very end.
Yeah.
So I have a question for Katherine and Ro. Now that you've written all the books that you have, can you watch TV or read a book and not have the writer going, ooh, that was a good transition. Ooh, I like the tension here. Or can you actually get lost in the media now? Or are you always, editor cap, or you're like, how did they do that? I need to know how to do this for my book.
Dude, I haven't been able to do that for years. So in the Air Force, I put together a weekly newspaper. And my roommates at one place, they were like the morning guys on the radio station on base. And between magazines and TV, somebody in our room was always critiquing everything else, right? You couldn't enjoy anything. Other people would be like, just shut up, right? Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can kind of turn it off, but you're always looking. But that's the good thing, right? You're looking at things. You're always getting ideas that go, oh yeah, that's really nice. That was smooth. We can incorporate that.
Not as much as a writer, I wouldn't think, but as an editor, which I've been doing a whole lot longer, I absolutely feel like Ro. And I think it started before I ever became an editor. Maybe it was a hint I was going to be one. I remember watching Frosty the Snowman as a child. I've never shared this on any public medium. It terrified me to the point where I had nightmares. And the main reason was because Frosty kidnaps the little girl and leaves her on the roof of the house at the end. You see Santa, and she's on top of this old brownstone. And it never shows how she gets down. It's the middle of the night. There's snow. It's like, or not snow on the house anymore because that's why I had to go north. But it's like, she almost dies going to the North Pole. She has to go in the greenhouse. He leaves her on the roof and flies off. I felt like it was almost a Pied Piper Snowman edition. But ever since then, it's like I can't watch things or read things without picking up little things like that. There are definitely times when I edit where I'm like, oh, wow, that was such a really unique way of doing this. Or, man, I wish I could write more like that. But that's been more recent, and it's usually more, I don't know, subdued, because I don't ever want somebody to feel like I'm trying to copy a work that I'm editing. So I try to have my writer hat and my editor hat, and they're separate. But you become a better writer by reading, just in general. And when you read books, you see what the trends are right now. They help you get rid of things like my obsession with dialogue tags or too many M dashes, and you're like, oh, that's a pet peeve. I can just get rid of that or improve. But the editor stuff, it makes it really hard, especially when it's stuff you read a lot, Ro. I'm sure like, oh, well, now I know the end of it. So pull out the laptop. Let's do something else because I've seen this kind of story a million times. It takes a lot to make me feel for stories these days. Is the hardest thing. It takes a lot to get me to cry over a book or like really have strong emotions toward a book because it's so hard to surprise me.
And Tanner, I just want to tell you the reason why I asked this question of them is because I would say for you, look at the stuff that you like, and you don't want to copy it because you're not a plagiarist. But if that's what you like, that's what you should be writing because that's what speaks to you. And like Rose said before, if you're not interested in what you're writing, no one's going to be interested in what you're writing.
Yeah.
So but look at when you watch whatever it's a movie or book, whatever, just be like, hey, that was really neat how he set this up, and then it all fell down. Just to try to understand what they're doing. And if you understand the mechanics, then you're not going to use that exactly, but you'll be like, hey, you just have more in your arsenal to use.
And there are some really good television shows that are a great example of following a formula that doesn't feel like a formula. And British detective shows, Cozy Mysteries, Poirot, there's so many, I forget the names of them, Father Ted, or whatever it is. They're really, really good about setting that thing up. And after a while, you can see it. I mean, you'll see it's like, okay, we're going to find the first body here. And then, will there be a second body? Maybe, maybe not. But if there is, then these few things are going to have to happen. If you're starting out right now going, I am going to write the next big original thing, you are not. There is no original thing. There's been no original thing for ever now, I think the last original thing was probably in caves in France somewhere, and that's only until we find the older one,
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely when it comes to inspiration, it's just like something I always see is like, when you're creating something, you create something that you would want to consume.
Yeah.
Like when you're writing a book, you want to write a book that you want to read. If you're making a movie, you want to make a movie that you want to watch, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of comes to inspiration. But something I've kind of noticed is there's kind of two types of inspiration. There's like aesthetic inspiration, like, oh, I really like how this like character or this kind of setting looks. And then there's like the kind of a writing groundwork of like, okay, this caused, this kind of character growth in this character, and then this kind of, it's more like a web. So something I've kind of noticed, like, okay, people will bring inspiration like aesthetically, but they'll kind of miss the point of certain scenes. Like, say there's a scene where a character goes into a bar and has this really, deep conversation with this character. An aesthetic inspiration would only be like, okay, someone went into a bar and they talked, and they kind of miss out why that scene was significant. So what I'm trying to get at is, how do you draw inspiration, but when you draw it, you just kind of take everything and don't miss the most important parts, I imagine.
Inspiration's a funny little thing.
Yeah.
And if you're waiting for inspiration to write, find a hobby that will keep you busy. Right, guys? I mean, it's work, man. It is. I think it just is. It's like anything else, because if it wasn't work, everybody would do it. Right? So you'll have
the Eagles jump in and save them when you lose inspiration, right?
What's that?
You can just have the Eagles jump in and save them when you lose inspiration.
Yeah.
I mean, inspiration will come in bits and pieces.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the aesthetic of what's the clockwork thing? Help me out. Don't leave me hanging.
The clockwork thing. I
like
don't know.
steampunk?
Steampunk. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the aesthetic of steampunk, right? But I'm not going to write a steampunk novel because I would have no idea how to go about it. I love the look. I'm reading a book right now by somebody else, It's a fantasy book, and I keep getting flashes of steampunk through it, but they never use that aesthetic. I kind of see it, but it's not, and it's not meant to be a steampunk novel at all, right? But there are still elements to it that I'm kind of imposing on it myself. So yeah, I mean, inspiration is you gotta don't look for it all in one place. Just cherry pick things, as you need them.
Yeah, like I said, when I decided that good old John James Audubon is going to be one of my characters now, that was nowhere on my radar, and then I just said, you know what, I can use this as inspiration. I'd like to steal from like the real world. That's why my first series is in England. It's a fictionalized version in England, but the geography is all laid out for me. I don't have to try to make a map that's logical. And I'm doing the same thing with good old Audubon. I'm like, you know what? He made drawings of fake birds, and he went over to Europe and he sold them to the nobility. And he's like, yes, these exist in North America. No, they don't. I mean, he's a bit of a charlatan. The Audubon Society does not tell you that, by the way.
E.T. Barnum was like that too, man. He was total freaking con man.
So and that's where I got the inspiration for. I knew this. He's going to be a character. He's one of 4 characters in my group, and I'm like, I don't have a feel for this guy. I'll have to figure it out when I write, and then just snap. It just snapped into place, and I'm like, yes. Now I know what he looks like. I know how he acts. I mean, I'm like, yes, I am running with this. But I often use at least traits from people that I know. If not, I do kill some people outright that I know. Actually, people at work are like begging for them to be in my book and be killed. But I don't understand them. But anyway, I'll happily murder them in print. But yeah, just look for inspiration wherever you get it. Joel Silva, he wrote, his whole magic system is based on you have to have smoke. And he said he was listening to a song and they talked about the guy was moving the smoke with his hand or something. And that was just oh my God, my whole magic system, you need to have smoke to have magic. And so now there's people who carry like braziers because, we got to have magic. I haven't actually read the book, but this is what in my head is what I'm thinking. And I mean, he heard it. He heard one line of a lyric in a song, and he's like, "I'm going to write a book, and that's my magic system." So you never know where it's coming from.
Gotcha. Well, I think Neil or Mom or someone just came in, so I might have to leave. But I thank you all for the opportunity. If anyone else in like the chat has questions, I guess they can ask them. But I do have to go. I'm really sorry.
Thanks so much, Tanner.
No problem. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tanner.
No Best problem. Of luck on all the writing.
I will. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
And do we have any final comments, or should we just end the stream here? Katherine, do you have I meant to tell people you are an editor on Readsy, correct?
Not on Readsy. I do occasionally take some beta reads, sometimes proofreads on Fiverr. Right now I'm taking some Fiverr beta reads, which are like, for me, they're more like light developmental edits because I just can't turn the developmental editor 100% off.
Right.
But I work for an editing company full time, so we're getting ready to come up on busier seasons, and so my availability on like Fiverr and stuff is limited, but it doesn't mean that I'm not happy to refer people to other editors. So if I can't help you, I can refer you to people who do.
If somebody, this is going a little bit in the weeds, but I think this is something that people genuinely want to know. What's it cost to get a developmental edit?
The last one I ordered was for my debut novel, and it was like $1,600 for 120,000 words.
Wow. Okay.
And that was through Fiverr, but it was worth every cent. But after that, I realized that she also offered pro beta reads, which is what I call beta reads by professionals, by editors who know what they're going to tell you. And so now I use the pro beta readers instead. I don't get developmental edits anymore. Professional beta read might still cost you a couple $100 compared to somebody who's just reading for fun, who'd read it for free, or fellow author. But you're getting the more targeted feedback too, I think, on structure. But yeah, I don't know. I love what I do. My main expertise, like you said earlier, Mike, was about pitch coaching, because when I came into indie, my only experience had been with trad, and I purposefully decided I was not going to pursue querying my books, because I knew my niche, and I was like, this is not marketable in the current market, so I'm not going to waste my time. But I also knew that my niche was reading on other platforms, and that they were reading indie. And I think that really came to light when Brandon Sanderson did his Kickstarter, and it went huge.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, here is the people, here is the niche. And so I'm very thankful for the response people have had to my books. But I do feel that some books do better traditional, some books do better indie. So for my day job, I do pitch coaching and help people strengthen their query. And I will be blatantly honest with people and say, hey, your book may be great, but maybe you should consider indie. And I've also told some indie people, this is a great book, and it's also very marketable right now. Would you want to consider traditional? And so, yeah, I love the process, but on both sides, it's a lot of work no matter which route you go. And you're not getting out of marketing or anything like that by going trad anymore. So it's like you can just wash that idea away. But that's mostly what I do, is developmental editing and then pitch coaching from the day-to-day, and occasionally a proofread on Fiverr if I'm having a slow season or something like that.
And can you tell me exactly what pitch coaching is? Because I meant to ask you this at the beginning.
Yeah, so usually I start reading somebody's synopsis, their query letter, and their first chapter from an agent or publisher's perspective, not a reader reading for fun. And that's, is this marketable? Does this meet the expectations right now in this demographic? Most books that are being signed today aren't going to be published for 2 to 4 years. Is this what's being signed? Because you can track publicly for free on like Publishers Weekly, all the deals that are being signed. Those books are coming out in the next 2 to 4 years, and they're trending to certain genres like AI related sci-fi. And so it's like, you can go, and I spend a lot of time researching that stuff. So part of my job is to help people strengthen their query letters, find reputable agents by directing them like, hey, you write dark epic fantasy. Have you gone and looked at the bestsellers who are trad published? Who are their agents? Are their agents accepting queries? If they're not, are their partners accepting queries? And then walking them through rewriting query letters, rewriting synopsis, thinking about whether their first chapter should actually be a prologue, or if it's got a good hook, because if it doesn't have a good hook, chances are they're not going to bother reading anything else you wrote, and things like that. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So everyone, they can find you on Fiverr if they need you?
Yeah, so right now I'm working with Autocrit a lot for like my pitch coaching, my developmental editing type edits I'm doing through Autocrit. And then Fiverr for the beta reads, and sometimes, like I said, the proofread. But I never get into line edit, copy edit. I feel like we're totally different functions. I work on the core of the car. The line editors and copy editors work their magic to make the car beautiful and drivable and luxurious. And I think sometimes that's, I don't know, Ro, if you've encountered this, but a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, why can't you just do both? And I was like, well, I know there are people who do all. It's just I specialize in this. And so it's hard for me to shift from the one to the other. I can't line edit while I developmentally edit, or I could miss something in your edit.
Right. I mean, with some of Mike's stuff, I've made comments before about that, but I would never call myself a developmental editor. I just wouldn't want that stress in my life, quite honestly. But I mean, there are things that you notice as you're going through and reading it all that, I think it's, why wouldn't I point that out? It provides value for him, hopefully. And it's good practice for me. EL asked, is Indie the new magazine for getting started? Do you know anything about Indie magazine?
I think he means they used to say, write a short story to show you've been published. is writing an indie book the way to get into with traditional?
It's not. I think there's a lot of myths, and I did a session not too long ago about these. There are some myths about indie and trad, and one of those is if you've been indie, you can never go trad. That's not true. And then there's ones that are like you have to go indie before you go trad, or that you have to have a certain amount of people or whatever it is. And the truth is, if you have self-published something, you have to have a strong track record with what you published, or else it makes it a red flag, right? If you self-published and the book flopped and you got a whole bunch of 1 and 2 and 3 star reviews, why would they want to take a risk on your book, realistically, from a business perspective? But if you published and it did well, but it just didn't sell a lot, and you're trying to pitch something else, then they might still be willing to look at you, even if you don't have 5,000 followers. So I think it's very case specific and work specific, because you're not asking them to republish usually what you indie published.
And this would be where a pitch coach would be gold, because you could guide them and tell them, this is what the trend is. If you're writing vampires now, good luck.
Regarding pitching, if I may. So I've been working with this guy for a few years. He is trying to get a television show made, a children's television show. And I made and designed for him a show Bible a couple of years ago, right, which they brought to people. And so now he's getting ready to send it to somebody at Apple TV. And we had a meeting last week, and they're taking their show Bible and they want to put it into a pitch deck, right? And I guess pitch decks are the new show Bibles, right? So the show Bible was like 20 pages, and a pitch deck is going to be 6 to 10 kind of thing. A lot of pictures, not a lot of words, kind of get the idea of it out without worrying about, having like all your characters. You can just use different pictures, right, for character. They just want a vibe off it, right? They don't need to know that this same person, they don't need to see the same person in that role in every slide or whatever it is. So I think it's kind of the same thing. And Joanna Penn on her podcast this last week talked about, she went to an event in England where she is, where it was a pitch thing, and she had a pitch deck that she gave to publishers, right? I mean, that was the whole point of that thing, right? You pay your money, you get to get in, you get your 5 minutes in front of a publisher, and you can pitch them whatever it is you want to do it. And so she had some help first, and she talks about that in the first 15 minutes of the show, of putting one of those together. And I think that's probably, if you want to go that way, you need to be able to put it in a very succinct kind of format like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I tell people, the point of the query letter is to get people to read your synopsis. And your synopsis should ideally be 1 to 2 pages of very succinct but gripping content. Here is my story. Here is why it is different. And here is what readers who already love that genre are still going to love, in a big nutshell. I mean, you don't want to leave agents with too many questions. Like, they should be able to walk away from the synopsis and know the story overall. But yeah, I definitely think being prepared, being able to succinctly pitch your book is huge. And it's something I struggle with. People are like, tell me what you're writing. And I was like, I wouldn't have spent 100,000 words writing the thing if I could just tell you, like, in a sentence what it's about. But John, I saw your question about the pen name. I feel like personally you need to establish your pen name way early in the game if you have the opportunity. Katherine D. Graham is not my legal name. I have been editing under this pen name as a legal doing business as name for a long time. And that is the pen name I chose to go with as a writer. So everything in my brand is tied to that pen name, but it's not my legal name. So if you know that, you're wanting to go indie and you have the time, research for whatever country you're in, what the laws are, how big are you wanting to go with this? If this is a 1-book deal and you're done, maybe you just pick a random name, you publish the 1 book and be done with it. But if you're wanting to do editing and appearances and querying and all that stuff, yeah, you probably really need to consider having it in place early so that you're not going back trying to scrub your real name off of that stuff. down the line. Like I didn't realize how much I used it till I went to an event with one of the people I do editing for, and I went and they had booked my hotel, and I'm like, hey, I'm here to check in, and I gave them the card with my legal name on it, and they're like, we don't have a reservation for this person. Well, because you have to give a copy of your government ID to check in at the hotel, and it turned out they had registered me under my pseudonym, the Katherine D. Graham. I had to go out to the car, get my business binder with my IRS doing business as paper, and bring it in because it showed both my names before they would let me check in at the hotel.
Good thing you had that. I mean, how many people carry that stuff around?
It was completely fluke. I'm not even going to lie. I had just gotten it and I was on the road. I was like, I got to go. I'm going to bring it with me. I'm going to carry it in everywhere. But yeah, that was.
If I can just tag on to that real quick. John, a lot of people, people sometimes go with a pen name when they are writing out of their genre, right? So I was going to pick up with a cozy mystery series. I was all hell bent on it before I got started doing what I'm actually working on now. And so I picked out a pen name. I've got a couple of accounts and emails and everything set up with this pen name for when I'm ready to start doing that. Is it kind of a nuisance? Yeah, it is. But if you're going to a totally different genre, you don't have to, right? But all the people who are reading your stuff now are expecting you, they're expecting fantasy, right? So if I turn up with a cozy mystery, it's going, what the hell is this? So you'll dilute one and or both of them, I think, if you do that.
Like you said, Joanna Penn. I know she writes Joanna Penn, and then when she writes nonfiction, it's J.D. Penn or whatever.
Yeah,
because
she's got like three different.
Yeah, because she's like, if you're reading nonfiction, do you want to read my fantasy? Probably not. So yeah, why confuse the reader? So I mean that makes sense, and it's just she's using her initials, so it's. But yeah, I don't know. My brothers told me I should go with Michael Mollman because it's more lyrical. And I just said, I've never been called Michael before in my life unless mom was yelling at me. So no.
Katherine, I'm going to disagree with you real quick.
I'm talking about pitching.
I just started a new job. Just started a new job a few weeks ago, and I won't tell you where it is. But I got there. I'm a writer-editor. That's my job title. And double spaces are part of their style guide. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. And then it's just, yeah, they are a thing of the past. But sometimes, John, you're going to you're going to find somebody at a publisher who is older than Methuselah, and that's the way they want it. And by God, you give them what they want.
Yeah, I always tell people to have a basic version that is pretty much plain text, almost. It's like got paragraphs, and it might have italics and stuff, but it's like very basic, no indents, no nothing, because so many agents have caught on to, oh, well, the publisher is going to have formatting software. They're just going to plug it in there and say to add it. There's no point in doing all this. Like if I'm formatting in Vellum, I just set it up and then I just rerun it and I'm done. But there are still people, every agent, every publisher, every company has its own unique requirements. And that's why you can't just submit the same manuscript to every single agent or software or anything like that. So, you've really got to read the guidelines. And I think the biggest pet peeve I've heard from agents is they'll put something these days and they'll be like, they just didn't read the guidelines. Well, in truth, we were querying 10 people at a time, right? Or 15 people all at once. And it got to be exhausting. Double spacing for some, only double spacing after periods for others, single spacing for other people. So they just took the one document and they sent it out. But if you have a blank, like plain document, it makes it so much easier to do.
Yeah. Here's the other side of that, John. And you said, because they want you to format it. If I'm an editor getting ready to pay you money for something, right, and bring you into our group, and you can't follow those basic instructions, you've just told me everything I need to know about how well you're going to take my edits in the future. And I don't want anything to do with it. So if they want it on pink lined paper with Hello Kitty in the corner, you give them that shit.
Yeah, because they're basically saying, can you follow a rule? It's like when you put in a resume for a job, if they say, we want 1 page max, and you're like, but I can give you 4 pages and I can't cut any of it out because I'm wonderful. You've just said, not me. I mean, you've just, you got to give them what they want. It's tedious. That's one of the reasons why I stopped trying to do traditional. I was like, I don't have the energy for this. It's exhausting.
Should you pay to edit a manuscript you submit to an agent? Tobias, if here's things. So my editing rates, I think, are very reasonable. I'm probably a lot less than most people. But I do have a $75 minimum, right? So if you want to send me a 1-page sheet and give me $75, happy to do it. But I would think for a I thought you were talking about a line there, but a manuscript. Yeah, you want to edit a manuscript that you're sending to an agent. I mean, at least a little. You don't want
at least with the self-editing, right? Like now there's self-editing tools too. If you're nervous that you're going to get an agent who's like, another human being has read this manuscript and now I don't want it. Like, I mean, I guess there are some of those. They're not entirely common, but like you could at least do your due diligence in a thorough self-line edit, self-copy edit. But having an extra human pair of eyes is huge if you can afford it, because you would only be doing it, I guess, on the first one, right? And then self-editing the future ones if the series gets signed or something like that. I don't know, but
yeah, and usually you're not sending them a whole manuscript anyway. You're only sending them like a chapter or two. So
personally, if it was me and if I was going to query, I would probably get it edited for sure before, because why not give the best version even if it costs me a little on the front end.
Yeah, I would say, because what is it, the 98% of people who pitch their query to agents fail. You want your very, very best that you're going to do. If you're going to go that route, then don't go halfway, because you're just, again, volunteering to be cut. So yeah, I would say if it were me, I would want to make it the very best I can make it, because otherwise, although talk to a pitch coach and they can tell you what's actually, selling. And then, if you have a chance before you do all that extra work.
It's basically the real life scenario. If Mike and I are walking in the woods and there's a bear behind us, it's like, I don't have to outrun the bear. I've just got to outrun Mike. So when you're sending that in, you've got to make yourself look better than everybody else who sends something in. And sometimes they might read a story that they really like, but it's just a hot mess, which again is telling them something about the writer and how much they care. And, yours might go ahead because of that. You don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe they choose Comic Sans as the font for theirs, and, because I want to stand out.
And that's Comic Sans should be the across the board choice for everybody to represent sarcasm. It would make all of our texting lives so much easier if we had a sarcasm font, and Comic Sans should be it.
For fun, Ro, I heard someone give editing advice that they change their books to Comic Sans when they're ready to do their final proofread, because it makes their errors stand out more. And then, of course, they change it back. But I was like, that's very interesting, finding a font that makes you go, to me, I catch more errors when it's in this font,
That would just be hard to read.
See, I have heard where people say change the font because then the words won't be the same on the line, and just because you're not reading the same line over and over, or change the font size, you'll catch things that otherwise you'll miss. But I don't know that I could read it in Comic Sans. That would just be annoying.
There's a lot of ways of doing it. I mean, the best way to catch spelling errors is to read it backwards.
Yes, I was just about to say that. When I proofread, I do the book backwards.
Wow.
It's a pain in the ass, and it takes a lot longer, but you will catch more that way.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well,
Catherine, or whatever your name is.
Yeah, Catherine's good.
Well, yes. Thank you, Catherine. I know that you are single parenting, so we want to let you get to your kid before your kid finds you.
We won't be back until next Tuesday, right? Because you're going to go off and try to make some money this weekend, Mike?
Correct. Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We got 3 days in a row.
Oh, goody.
I'm already
So
tired.
going anywhere but Mexico, Mike?
I'm going to Northern Virginia.
Nice.
I will be at, what's it even called? The Big Lick Comic-Con, Northern Virginia.
Nova. Big Lick Nova.
Yep.
Awesome. Hope it goes well.
So, well, thank you, Katherine, for being on. Thanks, everybody, for chatting with us.
Yep. Thanks to all the folks out there in the Peanut Gallery. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. And we will have you again, I'm sure, when we do this some other time. Next month, I talked to E.L. Lyons, I believe. God, I hope I get that right. So she will be on. But, yeah, Katherine, we will definitely have you on again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I know EL in the chat's probably like, oh.
And thank you, everybody, for getting Mike over 1,500 on the Twitter machine.
Yes.
You know, I got the 1,500 and I was going to post and I went to do a screenshot and I was down to 1,499.
Oh.
And then I waited. I was like, well, just wait, a couple hours. I checked and I was down to 1,496. I'm like,
Oh.
I didn't even tweet. How can you figure out that I'm a jerk? But, oh well.
Reputation precedes you.
Oh, well, thank you again, Katherine. And we will see you all hopefully next week. And now let's wave awkwardly.
Bye.